I noted that you called yourself the open source guy in the company, and it's strange that there always seems to be just a handful of open source guys in any given company. That your responsibility is to understand what's going on out there in those communities, what risks, what opportunities exist, and then bringing that into the company, as well as InnerSource. So was the InnerSource journey for you based around reuse, or improved collaboration between teams, or where did that manifest?
So first of all, call myself the open source guy. I'm one of them. There are
Right,
others, of
exactly.
course, as well. So my job title is FOSS ambassador. So I have a role also in that. And now InnerSource, you asked about InnerSource. So I had a um, this was also about 2017 or 18. I can't remember exactly. I ran into a work colleague, and I hadn't seen him in a while. And so this was, I ran into him at work. This was when not everybody was working from home, so people actually still went to the office, right? And so I said, "Hey, hey, how's it going? What's going on? What are you doing?" And he said, "Blah blah blah," and we're working on this. Um, we're working on a translation component who translates this into that. And I said, "Huh, that's very interesting. Have you, by any chance, talked to your neighbors next door in the office right next to yours? Because I think they are also working on something similar, translation component. I seem to remember, something in the back of my head there." And he said, yes, actually, in fact, we have, because when you're in the same office or right next door, you obviously talk. And so I said, okay, that's cool. And is it similar to what you're doing? And he says, yeah, that's really similar. And um, we looked into this and we thought, hey, if we could just write one component that both teams could use, maybe in a more generalized fashion, but then both teams can use it. We could save a lot of development time and money. And I said, I started to get excited because I was already advocating InnerSource, and then I said, okay, amazing. And how is it going? How is that working out for you? And he said, well, um, so we both went to our product owners. Our product owner somewhere here in the company, and the other product owner somewhere over there in a big company. And then we introduced the idea to them, and they thought it was a great idea. And so I got more excited. And then it's like, and how's it going? And it's like, well, then we decided we were not going to do it. Like, what? Wait, that that's a bummer. Why? And so the thing is, we didn't have the requirements basically that were needed, the prerequisites. And so one, everybody was working on a different technical platform. There's GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket Stash, TFS, whatnot, right? And so that obviously makes it more difficult to collaborate. And the legal requirements weren't there. Sounds funny, but we weren't even allowed to exchange code within departments within Mercedes-Benz, because there are contracts, and whoever's the money giver had the exclusive rights to the code. And if you wanted to share it with somebody else working for someone else in the same company, you know, you had to ask. And they were like, oh, I'm not so sure how this works. We have these contracts and blah. Okay. So that, and then the mindset sharing, that was also not there yet. But mainly also, yeah, the all these requirements. And so I was like, this is impossible, we cannot, we have to collaborate. And everybody's like, yes, of course. So that's when I really started to advocate InnerSource, and I said, look, it can't be that I cannot share the code with my colleague in the same company for some contract reasons. It's not like we're giving this code away to an external company. Yeah. So, and everybody's like, yeah, that's not right. Okay, let's do something here. So it's kind of the InnerSource story, like my personal InnerSource story.
Did ever those two teams, like, did it get sorted out so they could work on that common component, or was that the trigger to fix the underlying challenge for other teams in the future?
Yeah, so I don't think they actually ended up being able to work on the same component, but that was the trigger. I mean, that was the trigger for me to advocate more and more inner source, and that was one of the examples that I used a lot and say, look, this is we can't go on like this, right? We have to change something, and then our management listens and understands, and sometimes this then gets picked up and things change.